The X-59 shattered silence at 8:14 a.m., but the world didn't hear it coming. Supersonic flight was banned for 50 years because it broke windows, rattled cities, and made the sky sound like war. But on a California morning in 2025, a needle-shaped jet climbed into the desert sky without a single boom, just a whisper. This wasn't just a test flight. It was a declaration. The rules of speed are about to be rewritten. What happens when you break the sound barrier without waking a single child? The ghost jet Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, the same shadow facility that birthed the SR-71 Blackbird, designed the X-59 to fly faster than sound while producing noise softer than a car door closing. Think about that. A jet traveling at 1,500 kilometers per hour, slicing through the atmosphere at Mach 1.4. And the loudest thing you hear below is nothing. Nearly 100 feet long, needle-nosed, razor-thin, the X-59 doesn't look like a plane. It looks like a sculpture of velocity, a titanium arrow designed by obsession and wind tunnels. The Concorde roared, the X-59 glides. But here's what no one expected. The first flight didn't even go supersonic. Test pilot Major Lee's silent fear. Air Force Plant 42, Palmdale, California. 8:14 a.m., local time. Test pilot. Major Lee watched his instruments flicker to life as the F414 GE100 turbofan engine, a variant pulled from the FA-18 Super Hornet, roared beneath him. 200 aerospace workers and their families lined the roadside, phones raised, eyes locked on the tarmac. Lee had flown combat missions. He'd landed jets on carriers in storms. But this morning, strapped into a prototype designed to bend physics without breaking eardrums, he felt something different. Not fear, responsibility. If the X-59 failed, 50 years of progress died with it. He throttled forward. The jet lifted. 1 hour later, he landed smoothly at Edwards Air Force Base. They built peace faster than they built control. The ban that killed speed. Supersonic flight over US soil was illegal for 5 decades. Not because it was dangerous, because it was loud. The Concorde's sonic boom shattered windows, terrified livestock, and turned neighborhoods into complaint zones. So in 1973, the FAA said no more. For 50 years, speed had a ceiling. But in June 2025, the White House signed an executive order. The FAA lifted the ban, not because the law changed, but because the technology did. NASA's Quest mission wasn't about building a faster jet, it was about building a quieter one. Then the radar stopped, and so did history. How silence became a weapon. The X-59's design is surgical. Its elongated nose, nearly a third of the aircraft's length, splits shock waves before they merge into a boom. Instead of one explosive sound, the jet creates a series of soft pressure ripples. The result? A thump, equivalent to distant thunder, not a cannon blast. Engineers didn't eliminate the shockwave. They choreographed it. The airframe is asymmetrical, angular, almost skeletal. Every surface is optimized for one goal: minimizing sonic disturbance while maximizing speed. It's not a jet. It's a geometry problem solved at 40,000 feet. Titanium burned orange under the desert sky, progress glowing like regret. But the real breakthrough wasn't in the metal. It was in the mission. The Hydrone system gamble mid-flight engine restarts are rare in experimental aviation, and for good reason. If an engine fails at supersonic speeds, pilots have seconds to decide: restart or eject. The X-59's maiden flight tested the Hydrone restart system, a failsafe designed to reignite the turbofan mid-air if power dropped. It worked, but no one told the pilot it would feel like falling. For 60 seconds, the X-59 was a glider with the aerodynamics of a javelin. Then the engine roared back. Lee exhaled. 24,000 people tracked the flight live on Flight Radar 24. They didn't know how close it came to becoming a statistic. They engineered speed and gambled on silence. New York to Los Angeles in under 3 hours. The X-59 isn't designed for passengers. It's designed to prove a concept. If NASA's data shows that supersonic flight can occur without disturbing communities below, international regulators will rewrite the rules. Private companies like Boom Supersonic are already building commercial jets based on the X-59's acoustic research. Imagine a transcontinental flight from New York to Los Angeles in less than 3 hours. No layovers, no time zone exhaustion, no screaming toddlers for 6 hours. Just speed. Quiet. Frictionless speed. But here's the catch. The X-59 still hasn't flown supersonic. The sonic boom no one heard. The next phase of testing, scheduled for the coming months, will push the X-59 past Mach 1 overpopulated areas. Ground sensors will measure sound levels. Communities will report what they hear, or don't. NASA will compile the data and submit it to the FAA and international aviation authorities. If the sonic thump registers below 75 perceived decibels, roughly the sound of a dishwasher, supersonic flight could return to civilian airspace by 2030. But if the data disappoints, the X-59 becomes a museum piece. Sean Duffy, US Secretary of Transportation and acting NASA administrator, called the maiden flight an important milestone in aeronautical research. Translation: we're not done yet. The sky hummed with invisible ambition, a future too quiet to fear. Commander Sarah Trent's midnight calculation. NASA Armstrong Flight Research Center, Edwards Air Force Base. Midnight, 6 months before the X-59's first flight. Commander Sarah Trent, lead acoustic engineer, stared at simulation data that didn't make sense. The X-59's shockwave mitigation worked, but only at specific altitudes. Below 35,000 feet, the thump doubled in intensity. Above 45,000 feet, it vanished entirely. So she made a call. Restrict all supersonic testing to high-altitude corridors. It added 6 months to the timeline. It frustrated engineers. But it saved the mission. Because if the X-59's first supersonic flight had rattled homes, the FAA would have reinstated the ban. Trent didn't want glory. She wanted proof. Silence, she realized, was louder than applause. The Concorde's ghost. The Concorde flew from 1976 to 2003, a supersonic icon that never turned a profit. Why? Noise regulations restricted its routes. Fuel costs soared, and after a 2000 crash in Paris, public confidence evaporated. But the real killer was the sonic boom. Concorde could only fly supersonic over oceans. That limited its market to transatlantic routes, primarily London to New York. It couldn't fly supersonic over land, so most of the world never experienced its speed. The X-59 is designed to solve the problem that killed the Concorde: noise. If it succeeds, supersonic travel won't be limited to oceans. It will be everywhere. Metal wings reflected ambition and bankruptcy, both gleaming under history's harsh light. But first, it has to fly faster than sound without scaring a single neighborhood. The Skunk Works obsession. Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works doesn't design planes. It designs impossibilities. The U-2 spy plane, the SR-71 Blackbird, the F-117 Nighthawk, all born in the same secretive hangar where the X-59 took shape. Engineers spent years testing shockwave behavior in wind tunnels, tweaking nose angles by fractions of degrees, simulating acoustic signatures over virtual cities. The X-59's fuselage is a masterclass in restraint. No aggressive angles, no dramatic flares, just relentless, obsessive optimization. It's the quietest scream ever built, but obsession has a price. The X-59 cost NASA $632 million. One prototype, one mission, one chance. What happens when perfection is the only option? The flight that didn't break the sound barrier. The X-59's maiden flight was subsonic. No Mach 1, no shockwave, no boom. It climbed, cruised, and landed, verifying avionics, hydraulics, and engine restart protocols. Some called it anticlimactic. Engineers called it smart. Because rushing to supersonic without baseline data is how experimental jets become craters. The next flight will push Mach 1. The one after that will fly over populated areas. And if those flights succeed, the X-59 will rewrite aviation law. But for now, it's just a needle-shaped jet that flew for an hour and landed safely. And that, somehow, is revolutionary. They built the future, but forgot to make it dramatic. The global race begins. Boom Supersonic, a Colorado-based startup, is building the Overture, a 65 to 80 passenger supersonic airliner. United Airlines has already placed orders. Japan Airlines is interested. Boom claims the Overture will fly Mach 1.7, faster than the X-59, while meeting noise standards informed by NASA's research. But here's the gamble. Boom is betting billions on data the X-59 hasn't collected yet. If NASA's acoustic tests fail, Boom's investors lose everything. If they succeed, supersonic travel becomes a $100 billion industry. The X-59 isn't just a test jet. It's a permission slip. Startups raced toward a future NASA hadn't finished building. The 200 witnesses. 200 aerospace workers and their families gathered roadside at Air Force Plant 42 to watch the X-59's first flight. Some brought lawn chairs. Others held children on their shoulders. At 8:14 a.m., the turbofan roared, and they cheered. Not because the jet went supersonic, not because it broke records, but because they watched history whisper. For 50 years, speed was loud, disruptive, illegal. Now it's quiet, controlled, possible. One engineer wiped tears. Another filmed on his phone. A child asked, "Did it break the sound barrier?" "Not yet," his father said. "But it will." They watched metal defy noise and believed the sky could be kind again. The open question. The X-59's success hinges on one question. How loud is too loud? NASA's threshold is 75 perceived decibels, quieter than a vacuum cleaner. But perception is subjective. One community might tolerate the thump, another might protest, and if even one city complains, regulators might hesitate. The X-59 doesn't just need to be quiet, it needs to be acceptable. That's the harder benchmark, because noise isn't physics, it's politics. The supersonic dream deferred. The X-59's first supersonic flight is scheduled for the coming months. No exact date, no guarantees. NASA is cautious, Lockheed is cautious, everyone is cautious. Because if the X-59 fails, supersonic passenger flight dies, again. But if it succeeds, the sky becomes smaller, faster, quieter. New York to Tokyo in 6 hours, London to Sydney in 12. The world compressed. And all it took was 50 years, $632 million, and a jet shaped like a whisper. Progress sounded like silence, and tasted like patience. The needle that broke the ceiling. The X-59 soared for 1 hour. It didn't go supersonic, it didn't break records, but it proved something more important. Speed doesn't have to scream. For 50 years, we believed supersonic flight and noise were inseparable. The X-59 shattered that belief without making a sound. And now, the only question left is, what comes next? Subscribe so you don't miss the next shocking chapter.